Welcome, Petros. How are you doing today? So today we're talking about why fake nice people use the exact same phrases. Have you ever noticed some people sound identical when they're being nice? Welcome, guys. Today we're talking about why fake nice people use the same phrases. I'm doing well, thank you. So let's talk about pattern recognition. Essentially, you may notice that fake nice people say things to essentially keep conversation going. But oftentimes they don't seem as engaged if you actually look at them. It's almost like they're going through the motions. So they may smile at you, but you don't really see that there's like happiness in their eyes, or that their eyes, that they're actually feeling happy. Sometimes there's the mismatch between the tone of their voice and how they portray themselves. They may be over the top, and some people are like, oh, well, yeah, it's fine. I mean, people are fine. People can be over the top, and then you think that maybe that's just their personality. But then you start to kind of have a feeling, maybe it comes in your gut. Maybe you're noticing that they're almost like looking around to see like who's watching them, who's looking at them, who's monitoring them. And they're almost looking for an audience because they want to perform. They want to show people, whether they're trying to humiliate someone or belittle someone, or they want to be in the spotlight to be seen. And ultimately, it's not just tone, it's scripts. It's how things sound over and over and over. For instance, my husband and I actually went out yesterday. And one of the things that I noticed was there was this person who just kept repeating the same phrase over and over again. I can't remember what it is now. It's not really that important. But I think it was something along the lines of like, right, 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 And so ultimately what those things are, or, basically, or literally, you hear people stumble on that. And it's not just stumbling words. I used to stumble on the word like and, a lot, but not so much anymore. But essentially, so you have that moment where the person's like, right, right. Because first of all, that person really doesn't know what to say. Maybe the person wasn't really even paying attention to what you were saying in the first place, or whoever was speaking. And so they're trying to move the conversation along because, yes, they're not interested, So it's like, okay, yeah, uh-huh. That's crazy. People will, say things like that just to kind of get it going on. And oftentimes you'll hear the same phrase word for word for word for word for word because they're like, okay, let's move this along. In your teacher? Yeah, that could happen a lot for sure. Especially because, they're trying to do a million things at once sometimes, or try to move things along, right? I remember those days. And let's talk. And when you notice it, I bet from now on you'll notice this, because I literally started noticing it. I was like, wait a minute. And when you notice it, you can't unhear it. And the thing about it is, it will trigger recognition in you, like, oh, wait a minute. This person really isn't invested in this conversation. This person wants me to stop talking, or this person is not interested in the topic, or this person is just going through the motions. They're bored and they're frustrated, or whatever reason it may be, right? And oftentimes people can do this for various reasons. One of them can be social safety strategy. They don't want to be disagreeable. They don't want to disagree with anyone. They don't want to cause a stir. They want to keep the conversation going along and being somewhat social without being fully invested in it, right? It also avoids accountability. Well, this person said this, and I agree with them, so I'm just going to say right. And I've had someone say, why do you say right so much? I'm like, I don't know. I guess it could, my new talk, I don't know. But I think in doing podcasts and doing lives and things, I try to say right, I guess, to kind of just actually interact with people, so that's kind of one of my stumbling blocks. Yeah, it's like one of those. I guess it's a lot better than like and you know. I had one of my relatives, I would say, you know, and she would say, no, I don't, but you're going to tell me. And she would say that to me over and over. Every time I said, you know, she would say that. And I just kind of thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, and friends say that sometimes too. And I think with when you have friends, I don't think you judge them as harshly because you know them and you trust them and you have a history. But when you're meeting someone for the first time, a lot of things that you wouldn't normally notice about your tried and true friends, you're going to notice about strangers, you know, and it might even irk you and frustrate you. You know, I have someone who the word basically, like, literally drives them up the wall. So if you say basically, they absolutely hate that word, you know, or literally. And, you know, you think about literally, like that's another word that is kind of misused. Literally, I about died laughing. Well, clearly, did not literally die from laughing because that's not possible. So you're misusing the word literally, right? But let's not be nitpicky, right? Let's not be nitpicky here. And so the other thing too is it keeps control without conflict. A lot of people don't like conflict. I know myself, I don't like conflict. I really don't argue. I used to have a rule. I would not argue with someone about something unless I knew 100% that I was correct. Because I didn't want to essentially look like a fool by saying, oh, actually, it's this, when it turns out I was wrong. Because I think that that's one of the things that people literally are like, well, why did you say that to me? You were clearly wrong. And then you look like the one with egg on your face, right? Because people are like, she didn't know what she was talking about. Right? And then you have people who are like, why are they talking about that? And yep. Yep. And I think a lot of people do like to kind of gang up on people in certain scenarios. I think that it kind of makes them feel like they're superior and they like to prove people wrong. Um, I used to think that I could have an honest conversation with people and that they would understand. Yeah. I mean, and I think that that's fair. I mean, I think that truthful, honest people say, hey, you know, I was actually wrong about that. I'm sorry. I apologize, you know, and it makes sense. Yeah. It's like, I told you that and you were wrong, you know, but it's so, you know, it can be so difficult for people to admit that they're wrong because there's like this embarrassment element. There's this element that, oh my gosh, like people are going to think I'm stupid. But that's not the point. The point is having an honest conversation with people. And I think most people would be very slow to be like, oh my gosh, you're stupid or you're dumb or any number of things. You know what I mean? And so when people are continuing to do those things, it can literally feel like they're following a social script. They're doing what they think is expected. And that can be performance with the script. So people are literally like, okay, you know. So let's talk about the phrase trap. Let me talk to you about certain things that are phrases that people use, maybe as fillers. People use because they're not really sure where else to go. And so they say things like, I'm just saying, you know, I'm just saying, or basically, like we talked about, or I didn't mean it like that. And so if you have to say, I didn't mean it like that, then, you know, what's that? You know what I mean? So, and then what your body picks up there. Your body often knows before your brain does because your brain is the last to know. It's like the last to the awareness party. And that ultimately is because your gut has almost like a superpower to recognize patterns, to recognize inferences, to recognize how things are actually kind of going down, which is really crazy if you think about it. And ultimately, we know that when you get that off feeling, which a lot of you may have it in different ways, Maybe you just have a sense that you know something. You may feel like you get it in your gut. I know, for instance, with me, I get like a gut punch. I mean, it's not really a punch, but that's how I describe it. Had that since I was a kid. I know some of you may kind of have like a spiny sense kind of thing, or you may feel that the person, you may notice like their microfacial expressions or their tone of voice, or maybe how they start talking more quickly or they slow down more so. So those can all be certain things. Um, and so ultimately, it's like we learn that patterns tell the true story because people ultimately tell on themselves through inconsistencies. Or if you're a person who remembers what people are saying and how people are talking, then that is something too that you can often realize when words and actions don't align. If somebody's smiling at you, but you look at them and they seem really frustrated and really upset, then clearly that's not a scenario where the person is being consistent and being truthful with what's going on. Um, and ultimately, I say, patterns don't lie. It's unfortunate, and it comes down to it. I actually had a live here before this one, and we were talking about losing long-term relationships, like friendships, and so that can definitely happen. So, in closing, does anybody have any questions or anything, guys? So, ultimately, though, I think that a lot of people have different intuitive tones, or excuse me, intuitive tools based on where they feel their intuition. Some people feel it in the gut. Some people actually just seem to kind of have this sixth sense of something's not right. I remember someone that I had actually known for quite a while. I'd known her, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. I mean, we were mutual, or we were acquaintances actually. And I just remember there was something about her that like I wasn't sure what was going on. I knew that something wasn't aligning, but I didn't know exactly what was not aligning. And so somebody that I know, my sister, actually, we were talking about it. And I said, there's just something about it. Like, I just don't know. Like, she's not telling like the full truth. Like, she's not being authentic. Like, I just feel it in my gut. And she's like, yeah, I feel that too. And I was like, I don't know what it is. Um, and then later we found out that there was an addiction issue that we hadn't known about, which was kind of sad. But she has since recovered and has done really well. But it was just that there was that off thing that wasn't really working. It was like, your actions and your words aren't aligning. Or if you meet someone and you initially get a negative experience from them, oftentimes, we try to talk ourselves out of it, especially as women. Or maybe you grew up and were taught to, be nice. Maybe you were taught to give people a chance, not to bully people. And so you may then try to ignore the feelings that you have. And that can be something that can be extremely kind of hard to reconcile. And as I've said to people, oftentimes if you have a gut feeling, you really, really need to trust it. So I just want to say thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I hope you'll come back and see me again soon. I do go on, YouTube live at 12:30 each day. So feel free to check me out again. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.